Hi everyone, it's Rachel back with the Shades of Orange, and today I'm here to do a video recommending books to read after finishing the Expanse series. While this video is targeted at those like myself that have recently read Leviathan Falls and are now looking for a new series to pick up, this video is also going to be spoiler free for anyone who has not yet read the series or is only partway through, or maybe for those of you that have watched the TV show and are looking for similar books to pick up. Obviously, if you have not yet finished the Expanse, highly recommend doing so, starting with, of course, Leviathan Wakes. And I have done a whole video on why you should read the series, and at the end of that I do have spoilers for Leviathan Falls, and so I definitely recommend checking that out if you haven't already. But I'm hoping a lot of you have actually come from watching that video, because I got so many comments saying, well, now that we're done, what do we do with our lives and what do we read next? And I'm hoping that this video will answer that question for a lot of you. I will admit that I went into a huge reading slump after finishing Leviathan Falls, and I really struggled to find another space opera to pick up, but I think I got some really good options for you all, and hopefully you agree. Let's get started. Now, the first book I want to recommend is Shards of Earth by Adrian Sikorsky. This is the first book in a new trilogy that's just come out, and it definitely gave me Expanse vibes. This story is set in a future where these powerful ancient aliens have shown up on Earth and they ravage the Earth. This is all in the setup to the book, so it's not spoilers. And they actually go about changing the Earth itself, which is why they're known as the architects, because they turn it into this beautiful piece, but in doing so they completely destroy the planet, causing humanity to go on the run and colonize other places. However, the architects continue to follow them, continue to reconstruct their planets, and the story goes from there. This book definitely gave me Expanse vibes in terms of a few things, one being the epicness and another thing being the aliens themselves. The idea of having this ancient race with this powerful technology really ties into a lot of the themes and ideas that I really wanted to see explored within the Expanse. So I think this book takes it up another level and really makes the stakes so huge. So if you really like those ideas in the Expanse and wanted even more, I think you'll find this very satisfying. I will mention, however, that I would say that this one is far less character focused. While there certainly are characters that we are meeting within the story, it's less of that really intimate perspective that we get with the Expanse, where we're sitting with one crew and just a handful of people that we're getting to know very well over the course of the 9 books. Instead, I find these characters are in the story for the reason of kind of progressing the plot. But again, it's much more of a larger overview of what is happening within this universe rather than really getting to know the personal quirks and banter between a few people. So in terms of finding a read-alike in this video, I do think it's really going to depend on identifying what aspect of the Expanse you love so much and are trying to chase in another story. Next up, I want to talk about Roboteer by Alex Lamb, which is the first book in a trilogy. This is set in the somewhat near future. We are following a man who is a roboteer, meaning that he has certain implants that allow him to communicate directly with technology. And within the story, he and a few other people start to uncover what might be some ancient alien technology, and it uncovers a larger plot, and the story goes from there. This one I want to recommend if you're looking for a similar plot once again, because it's definitely going to hit on some of those ideas that we see explored within the Expanse and perhaps take them again a little bit further if that's the direction that you really wanted the Expanse to go. And so I like this one. I will admit that while this one is much more character focused than the last book I mentioned, the characters are a little bit of archetypes or stereotypes. They were a little bit flat to me. I certainly did not fall in love with them the way I did with the crew of the Rossi, but it was still an engaging story, just perhaps not quite as nuanced or complicated as the Expanse. There is a lot of political discussions within the story. There are some zealot religious groups back on Earth that are trying to keep the Earth pure, and you get to see how that plays out. So again, if you kind of like the dynamics between the different political groups, you'll enjoy that. But again, I just didn't think it was as nuanced as what you see in the Expanse. But again, if you're just looking for more that's something similar, this one definitely gave me vibes, and I would, definitely love to see people continue on with the trilogy. I've only read the first 2 books at the time of filming this, and I'm kicking myself because I want to continue on. I know that there's a generational jump, and I really love to see where these ideas are going to go in the future, so I've really got to get back to this trilogy myself, hopefully pretty soon. Next up, I want to recommend On Vascular Station by David Weber. This is the first book in the Honor Harrington series, and at the time of filming this, admittedly, I've only read the first book, but I really think that this book has potential for those of you that are looking for an Expanse read-alike, particularly a space opera that is focused around really interesting, likable characters. Now, within the story, we follow a young female commander, Honor Harrington, and we follow her as she is sent off to work and command the Basilisk Station, which you find out is kind of unofficially a place that people are sent to be demoted. It's not exactly a honorable place to be sent, and it's just a way to get rid of someone who is, just done something wrong and you want to kind of shove them under the table. However, you find out right in the prologue of the story that there's actually some political significance to this place because there are other nations or factions within this universe that are eyeing up that space for economic reasons. And so this actually becomes a really important place for her to be, and you get to follow her from there. I really enjoyed this first book, and I am very excited to continue on with the series, but this is one I'll admit that I actually went back to the series right after finishing Leviathan Falls, and the only thing I ran into is the fact that it felt almost so similar that it was hard because I wanted it to be the Expanse and it wasn't quite. So I think it's very similar, but you might not want to pick it up exactly the moment that you finish Leviathan Falls, because I find reading this exact same book back to back is very challenging in terms of causing people to go into reading slumps. But when you're ready for another space opera that's again very character driven, I think this is a great one to get into, partially because it's actually a very long running series. So if you enjoy the fact that you got to binge through all the Expanse books, you're going to have that same experience here. I thought, yeah, the characters are really good. There's a lot of funny banter, and it also has a lot of interesting discussions around cultural differences because again, within this future, there's different factions, different groups, and they don't all have the same beliefs or nuances to their cultures, and so you get to see how that all weaves together, and I thought it was really fascinating. If I had one complaint, I would say that it's the fact that Harrington does not like coffee, so I always say that she is not a Holden. She instead drinks hot cocoa, which is fine, but other than her dislike for coffee, I really enjoyed her as a character. I think a lot of you will too, and hopefully we will all just fall in love with the rest of the series. I've heard great things about it and can't wait to get back to it myself again once I'm ready for something like that. Up next, I want to recommend The Last Watch by J.S. Dew, and this is the start of I believe a long-running series that begins when you have a group of criminals and other lowlives that are sent off to protect this station at the edge of the universe. There is supposedly nothing there. It's kind of a similar premise to the last book, where it's just a place that people are sent off to get rid of them. However, wouldn't you know, there ends up being something more going on, and these lowlives are forced to band together and actually forced to protect the universe. Now, this book is often described as Game of Thrones in space. Specifically, what they're referencing is the wall up north and the idea of the criminals that were sent there to protect the wall. And so I can definitely see where that reference comes into place. But reading the book, I do think that it's going to appeal to those of you, again, that are looking for the characters that you love so much in The Expanse, because this book is very character focused. The characters are kind of a little jokey. There's a lot of banter. The stakes are high within the story, but it doesn't stop them from kind of cracking jokes and having fun along the way. So I think if you like that balance of having a serious tone where something really big is actually happening, but the characters are very likable and you get to kind of see them make fun of each other as they're going through these very serious situations, I think that this one will have that similar tone you're looking for. And it's fun. At this time, I've only read the first book in the series, and I believe it's going to be at least 3 books, possibly more, and I do want to get back to it at some point. So again, if you're looking for that aspect of The Expanse, I think this one might scratch that itch. Next, I want to talk about Nofap Gloss by Essa Hansen. This is the first book in a space opera trilogy. The next book is supposed to be coming out very soon from Orbit Books, so I will be reviewing this. But this first book follows a young boy who, right at the beginning of the story, there is a terrible incident that happens. He is under the control of these aliens overlords that are treating him and his family like slaves. There is a terrible incident that happens. Things go horribly wrong, and through circumstances, he ends up getting on a ship with a group of of scavengers and finds his own found family. So this is a book I want to recommend for those of you that like the found family aspects of The Expanse. So if you just love the idea of a crew of misfits getting together and really becoming their own community, I think you're going to get those vibes from this book. But I also want to recommend it because in terms of space opera, this one is actually quite dark. The beginning is really brutal. There are some really horrific creatures that are shown. And for those of you that also, like myself, of course, love the horror aspects of the Expanse series, which you see in some of the books more than others, but if you like those aspects, if you like when the series gets dark and brutal and just pretty gruesome, I think this book will really appeal to you, particularly the beginning, and I'm very excited to see again where this series goes. So again, I believe it's a trilogy, so we should have a few more books to get through, and I think again that it'll kind of scratch that, you know, ragtag group of scavengers going through space and kind of running into a plot that's bigger than themselves, and I definitely enjoy those tropes in space opera, and I quite frankly just can't get enough of them, so this one might scratch the itch for you. Next, I want to talk about Machine by Elizabeth Bear, which is a book within the White Space Universe series. And this is technically the second book, but it's a companion series, so you definitely can start here like I did, although I've heard that the first book would also be a good comparison for the Expanse series, or at least I believe so. But I'm going to talk about the one I've read because that's what I can recommend. And this book follows a doctor who is on a ship that receives a distress call from an old generational ship that shows up. When they go onto the ship, they find that no one is awake, everyone is in cryogenic sleep, and they need to find out what happened. They come into contact with an artificial intelligence, and the story goes from there. I want to recommend this one because while it's only a standalone, so you don't get that series binging experience, I think that the story that you're going to get within this novel will really satisfy a lot of the, again, themes that you've seen in The Expanse and hopefully you love as much as I do. This one is very character focused, so you really get to spend time with the doctor and her crew, and I think that they're very likable. You get to really understand them as people, and they're really well fleshed out, again, for the fact that it's only one novel. Often you need multiple novels before you get attached to characters, but that wasn't the case here. This one is a little bit more intellectual and will have some really good conversations about how the white space works, and I think that's really interesting because, of course, in The Expanse, a big conversation is that they were never able to achieve light space travel, and so they were always limited to how fast they could go in space, how far they could go, and that kind of is the same conversation they're having in this one. So I really like some of the discussions that are brought up there. But more so, the reason I want to recommend this book is that it's also a mystery. They get on the ship and they don't know what's happened. It's all quiet, it's all dark, and this book especially reminded me of books like Leviathan Wakes, where you have the beginning of the series where they're investigating and trying to track down Julie, and they're going on ships and trying to find evidence. I think if you like those aspects of The Expanse, this book will really appeal to you. It definitely gave me those similar vibes. And again, I really want to read the first book by this author in her series, Ancestral Night, but I again can't recommend something I haven't read, so that one is on my own TBR for my next Expanse read-alike. And the last book I talk about is one I'm actually still reading, so I can't give you a full proper review yet, so I will come back once I finish it. But I thought you all would be interested to know which book I landed on as my follow-up read after finishing Leviathan Falls. And of all the books I talked about, I'll admit this one is probably the least like The Expanse, but because of that, I think that's why it's working the best, is, as I kind of alluded to within this video, while the books I mentioned before are really similar to The Expanse, that actually might make it harder to get into them right after finishing Leviathan Falls, because sometimes reading something really similar can almost be more difficult because you can't help but compare it. So the book that I want to talk about that I'm reading right now is Hidden Empire by Kevin J. Anderson, which is the first book in the saga of the Seven Sons, and I believe it's a 7-book series. So again, this is going to appease my need to binge a series because most of the Expanse series I binge back to back to back, and I love that experience so much. So I've been looking for another space opera to get into, and I love that this is more than a trilogy. This one is a bit different than The Expanse in the way that it's perhaps a bit more fantastical. There are some fantastical elements like telepathy introduced within the book. This is set within a future where humanity has moved past Earth, and there are now three major factions that exist within the universe. And one of them is telepathic priests. There are more traditionalists, and then another faction as well. The story at the beginning, as far as I've read, follows two archaeologists who are uncovering a different planet site, and within there they find ancient technology of an alien race that has long believed to be dead. And so the story again follows the consequences of finding that technology and what it's going to do for the story. I understand that this one is going to read a little bit more like epic fantasy. It certainly has so far, and it just feels very epic, very immersive, and just the kind of story I want to get lost in. So I'm hoping to read these books, they like I said, back to back to back, because they're all published, they're all put out, and it's just giving me the epic feels I wanted, but not so similar to The Expanse that I'm overly comparing it. So this is my personal recommendation, what to read next, because again, that's literally what I'm doing myself. So I would love to hear from those of you that have finished it, what you think of the rest of this book and the rest of the series. So that is it for this video here. I would love to hear of the books I talked about, which ones are you planning on checking out? And I would also love for you to share your own recommendations for Expanse read-alikes, because while you're reading my recommendations, I can read yours. If you would like another video on this topic, please let me know. If this video is still getting comments and views, say 3 to 6 months down the road, I can certainly come back with a whole new list of recommendations, because I'm always reading more space opera. If you like this video, please consider subscribing. I do read a lot of space opera as well as adult science fiction, fantasy, horror, and thrillers. You can help me out by giving this video a thumbs up, sharing it around online with other people looking for read-alikes for The Expanse. And if you hit the little notification bell, you'll never miss another video from me. Thanks so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.